Sola.
Thank you, Nicole, and great to be with everyone. I'm really sorry, actually, that I've missed the earlier sessions this week. They sound like they've been absolutely fascinating. But we're really excited to be with you for the next hour and a bit to talk about this very important topic, effectively two important topics, really. One is this crisis that we're going through and what we can learn from it. And obviously the other is the other crisis that we've been working on for quite some time and will probably need to keep working on for even longer. We're really excited to have Climate Kick, Sola from Climate Kick here in the room with us. In just a minute, I'll pause and let Sola describe a little bit about Climate Kick for those of you who aren't familiar with the organisation, a bit about how they've actually approached the big issue of systems change and transitions through the lens of climate change and the way they've built their portfolio of projects and experiments. And then we'll get into the session for today. So maybe without further ado, Sola, would you like to walk us through? Should I put the slide up that we discussed?
Yeah, I think that would be good. Thank you, Brenton.
Okay.
So, yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you for letting me be here with you for a short moment of time. Just maybe quickly about Climate Kick. So, Climate Kick is it's a European knowledge and innovation community, and we're essentially working on accelerating transition to zero carbon, climate resilient society. So, we are a public-private partnership, and so we bring together partners through business, through academia, and sort of public and non-profit sectors to really create a network of expertise. And through that, we work on innovative experiments, programs to really understand how innovative services and systems can be developed, sort of brought to market and scaled. And what we really focus in on is convening power. So really trying to bring together groups to create innovation that can lead to and support systemic change. I work within our sort of education sphere, education and learning sphere, and within that element, we have a range of educational activities that we have had ongoing for the last 10 years, but we are shifting our focus in sort of in response to sort of the context of the fast approaching climate change, which really requires different breadth and quality of collaboration within education and learning. So we are really curious about how we can go beyond our current programs and actually start experimenting more and creating portfolios of experimentation around education and learning. We are sort of focused within our activities on sort of three key objectives. We are focused on learning for innovation and systems change. So really understanding how learning and sense making can be at the heart of transformation. We focus on new skills for climate action. So what type of vocational skills, for example, do we need to equip people with? What is in demand so that we can move towards net zero emissions economy as early as possible? And then we are also very focused on sort of leadership for transformation. So what is it that leaders and those with leadership capabilities need to understand? How can we help them think in systems? How can we support and enable the competencies of reflective agile learning and sense making for intervention in complex systems and dynamics? So these are sort of the topics at hand for us. And I think the reason why I'm here today is more to maybe dive into one of the elements that we have started to dabble into, is that we focus in on something that we call EduX. So EduX are our is our portfolio of sort of experimentation when it comes to education and learning. Within that, we want to sort of test some leading edges, or start sort of both inspiring others and ourselves in terms of how can we challenge our current activities, and how can we actually create a portfolio of activities where we are nudging, where we are experimenting, where we are looking in different directions in terms of what is it that we could be accelerating and making work in terms of that. To give an example of some of the experiments that we're working with this year, we are convening actors for something that we call empathy talks. So actually understanding how creating a space for empathy talk can lead to understandings within different fragmented parts of cities, within regional activities. We're working with students, sort of youth and students, on speculative design. We are looking at how artificial intelligence can aid understanding of climate change issues, and how can support sort of the future literacy and essentially youth and young people becoming more literate around the future. And we are working quite extensively on social labs as well. These are elements that go into our portfolio of experimentation, and this is something that we are doing on a yearly basis, with the emphasis of really taking then these different experiments, looking across them, viewing through them, and seeing where is it that we can then accelerate in terms of our understanding of learning and education. I don't know if you, Brenton, have more that you would like me to dive into, or if you have any questions that you would like to put towards me.
No, I think you've set this up very, very well in terms of explaining Climate Kick, the need for experimentation around innovation and learning for climate change, because in a way that sets up what this workshop's all about. And I'll explain a little bit about how this conversation started between your organization and ours. I might just go back one slide and just give people a very quick sense of what we're going to do. We're going to have a quick introduction as to this project and the workshop. We're going to do an exercise, as Nicole mentioned, on Miro, and we've got time to come back and have a longer conversation about what emerged and have some Q&A. I will apologise for Sola in advance. She has to dash off to another meeting, so she won't be around for the discussion and Q&A, but she will be here for the kickoff part. So I just wanted to, from our perspective, so States of Change, for those of you who have been to several of these events this week, probably know a bit more about us, but States of Change is a global collective focused on building the next generation of public innovation learning. And the sort of exam question, which we've held for 5 years or more now, is how do we improve the quality, the coherence and reach of public innovation learning? And so when you look at the objectives that Climate Kick have for EduX and for their work on experimentation for learning, you can hopefully start to see where the sort of points of connection are. For us, we've been really interested in supporting public servants around the world to be more experimental, to be more intentional about the things that they're trying, and to build a culture of experimentation within our organizations. And in a sense, the last 9 months have been quite an interesting demonstration of what can be achieved when public servants are given the license to try things quickly, as we've had to do during this particular crisis of COVID. In fact, some of you may have seen this slide or a version, this image or a slide of it over the last few months. But in essence, we have, as societies, as citizens and states, as governments, had to embark on a very remarkable learning process in terms of understanding this new virus and how it impacts on our cities and our societies and on our bodies, and to quickly coordinate and work out how best to reduce the risk of this in our communities. And we suddenly now have all become experts in exponentials and in thinking about how we can flatten curves. And this was the sort of the curve of coronavirus, and people have talked about the hammer and the dance. So basically knocking this curve on its head and then keeping things at a sustainable low level. This, you know, and we're not the first people to observe this, but, you know, there are other curves that we need to flatten. And, you know, so when we started our conversations with Climate Kick about what the transferable lessons were from COVID, we felt that there was a real opportunity to capture novel practice, policies, governance systems, and so on that have emerged over these last 9 months, and to ask ourselves the question, what can we learn from this period that can be applied to this longer, bigger crisis of climate change? We were very nervous, anxious of some of the language of snapping back or getting back to the old normal. I think some of that language has moved away now. But we were really keen to make sure that we bear witness to the remarkable experimentation and new ideas and approaches and practices that have been tested and tried during this time. And if we could, to think about how we might build a framework that would actually play back to people just how far they've come and what muscle memory that they have now developed that could actually be you know, redeployed on this other challenge. So in a sense, we've been sort of looking at a number of different layers of practice and policy over the last 6-9 months. We've been interested in, you know, looking at policymakers and sort of political leaders. What are the behaviours or the skills and attitudes that they have been tapping into during this period? How have they approached their work in a different way? We've been interested in new policies that have been trialled or developed, everything from, you know, basic income to how we use our cities and streets differently. We're fascinated by new governance models that have been deployed. How are we collaborating? How are we making decisions? How are we bringing our communities into the confidence of the decision-making process and maintaining trust as we move forward? And finally, what are the sort of social practices and behaviours that we're seeing that are now different? If you'd asked us 12 months ago whether we would be as adept at social distancing as we are, or that 90% of us probably won't touch a plane for most of this year, we wouldn't have imagined that. And yet we have adapted. And the interesting question for us is, again, what are the transferable elements? What can we take from this period that may be useful to keep in our backpack of policy ideas and levers as we look forward to you know, continuing our efforts on decarbonising our economies and societies? And for those of you, I know there are a few system change buffs in the audience. You know, it would be remiss of us not to mention sort of Danella Meadows and her leverage points in the system. In a way, you can think about the 4 sort of areas that we've chosen as picking on a number of different points along the system, not just looking at policies, but also looking at decision-making processes. Not just looking at decision-making processes, but also looking at culture and values and behaviours. So this is something that we're really interested to explore with you over the next hour, and also in lots of other conversations that we're having. So over the last month, we have already started a number of these conversations. We've had a series of workshops. We've popped up at different festivals, innovation festivals around the world. And tonight it's your turn. These are deliberately small. I don't want to give away what people have said previously, because we actually really want to hear what your experiences have been, because we know that experiences around the world have been varied. This has been probably one of the greatest natural experiments in comparative public policy that we've seen in our lifetime. And we want to make sure that we really tap into that diversity of experience and through that start to see whether we can discern some particular patterns that are emerging. What are some success, what are some successful ways of approaching this so that we can then share this with those parts of the world maybe who haven't had that experience. So that's the purpose of today and the process. Very briefly, where we go to next, we are coming to the end of our sort of harvesting phase, where through these workshops we're generating lots of ideas and insights from these conversations. Later this month, we will be synthesizing all of your comments, all of these conversations, all of the notes from the different mirror boards, and trying to see if we can actually develop, as I say, a bit of a framework that helps people think about the different levels at which they could take action using muscle memory that they now have within their organizations and jurisdictions. In November, we will be trying to turn that into something that we can use for disseminating and sharing with policymakers and other change makers around the world through a series of co-design workshops. And then all things going well, from December, we will then start getting this out through our networks, through people who've come along to our workshops, and through our own publication channels. And if it goes really well in 2021, we'll keep doing more of that and really sort of try and get this in the hands of anyone who would find it useful to apply to their work. I'll come back to this at the end, but we encourage you, if you're really interested, you can actually run this workshop yourself with your own teams. We actually have a survey that captures the same questions that we're going to run through on this workshop. Please tell us if you've got something that is connected or you feel should be connected to what we're doing. We'd love to kind of make sure that we're joining up all of the dots, and you can actually sign up for hearing more about this project, and obviously all of the other work that we're doing at States of Change as well. But for now, and I'll bring that up again at the end, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to our Miro board. I hope some of you have played with Miro before. I imagine Nicole is shortly going to put the link into the chat. There we go, as if by magic. Thank you, Nicole. Feel free to click on that and dive on in. We have effectively 4 questions for you. And well, it's one question, but with 4 different areas. Our question is, what new behaviour, skills and attitudes have you seen during the COVID pandemic that you believe may have some application to working on climate change? And the same question for each of these 4. So I guess what we're not doing is we're not trying just to capture novel practice during COVID. We are trying to identify those things that we think may have a role to play on climate change. Some people are already starting. Great. What we're going to do is we're going to give you about 20 minutes to do this. We would have, in other workshops, we've broken into breakout groups to have this conversation. We're going to try something different here today. We're actually going to put on some thinking music, and we're going to turn off our videos, and we're going to let you play with the board. When the music stops, feel free to turn your attention back to us, and then we can have a conversation and some Q&A. So in the meantime, go crazy. You can't break the board, and there's no such thing as a wrong answer. So really looking forward to seeing what you come up with. And thank you again, Sola, for joining us for the start of this session. Nicole, Music Master, take it away.
While I set up the music, are you able to post the question into the chat? I think some people are wanting to do it outside of the Miro board. So you can start wherever you like. You don't need to start in one corner, but just make sure that you kind of spread your time across all the different sections. Brenton will post the question in here, and we'll also put it on the Miro board as well. If you're having trouble with the Miro board, feel free just to like write by hand or post it in the chat, and then I can go and put it on the Miro board. Thank you, Brenton. Put those in. Oh, sorry.
Thank you to everyone who's putting so many great comments up there. We've got about another 5 minutes to go. So if you haven't spent time looking at all 4 of the quadrants, make sure you give some time to each of them in turn, and I'll let you know when we'll bring it back to the whole group. About another 5 minutes. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I hope you found a bit of time to relax and let your thoughts unfold. I hope you found that a nice process. Nice work, Nicole, on the music choices. That was great thinking music. What I thought we might do now, if it's okay, if you're still gathering a few last thoughts, feel free to keep going. But so don't feel you have to stop. But what I thought we might do is just maybe do a bit of a tour across the board together, and just sort of see what, if we look now not just at our own answers, but look across the board, if we can start to see things that we think are interesting or some patterns emerging. I might make some comments as we go through. If you'd like to add a comment, if you'd like to speak, or you'd like to speak to maybe one of the ideas that you wrote down there, or expand, or if something occurs to you, feel free. There are multiple ways you can do this. You can put your hand up, and we can bring you into the chat, into the call, or you can put a comment in the chat function. And then if you like, we can bring you in to have a conversation. It's not quite as free-flowing as if we're all in the room together, but this is the best we can do in the webinar mode. So if you'd like to say something, please feel free to let us know, and Nicole will whisk you into the conversation. So don't feel you have to sit there passively and not talking, because I will get very, very tired of my own voice very quickly. So let's have a look at behaviours, skills and attitudes. And I think what we're really interested in looking at here is, as policymakers, as leaders, what have we been doing differently over this last 6 or 9 months? And, you know, so being open to more ideas, yes, the use of data, compassion and flexibility, long-term thinking, which we heard a little bit about earlier this morning, letting go panic, more awareness of mental health. I think people recognize that this is actually kind of hard to do your day job when you've been physically removed from your colleagues and your office, and still expecting to try and get things done. Yep. Policymakers need to feel safe to learn new skills and how to lead in a new sustainable future. Absolutely. Some policymakers are unsure how to navigate these new waters, indeed. Renewed interest in Indigenous knowledge and practice, yes. Yes, a lot of adaptability, agility and adaptiveness, adapting to uncertainty, ideology agnostic. That's an interesting one. I'm not sure who wrote that, if they'd like to expand, but certainly in Australia, we've seen a very explicit recognition that there's no place for ideology in a crisis like this. And as a consequence, we've had things like free childcare for a short period of time. I can't see the chat, so I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone who wants to come in and have a conversation. Otherwise, you can keep listening to me for a little bit longer. Let's maybe sort of go down the board, and let's talk about new policies that we've seen. I always find this one quite interesting because our day job is looking at policy innovation, but we don't always spot everything. And so one of the great things about doing these workshops is we always hear of something interesting that we weren't aware of before. So if you feel like expanding on any of these by chatting, just let us know. Someone put TBI. I presume that's something like UBI, but if someone wants to let us know what the T stands for in TBI, unless it's a temporary basic income, maybe. So we've seen opening rural schools, social protection, yep, more responsibly, testing old-fashioned education models, indeed, distance online learning, online workshops, taxing the rich more, flexible work policies, policies that have an observable impact on mobility. Yep. digital assets tokens, okay. Digital citizen engagement. That's quite an interesting one. Actually, in some respects, it's democratized access to certain conversations that might have been before geographically concentrated around capital cities. And actually now it's become easier for people who are geographically dispersed to be able to sort of join important conversations. Yep. Germany, thank you, Usha. Germany is contemplating a legislation for right to work from home. So making it a right rather than something that that's a sort of a negotiable rather than something that you can insist upon. Yep. Closing national parks to adapt to encourage rehabilitation, transparency in policy and data governance. We might come back to that one. Use of digitalization but not surveillance, e.g. Taiwan. Yes, I think there's probably a number of fans of the work of Taiwan over the last 9 months in particular, and Audrey Tang, who's I know has spoken on a lot of forums about their work in using humour to sort of, amongst other things, to tackle misinformation. I'm going to slide along now to look at governance models. And so I guess what we're interested here is, you know, often our sort of existing decision-making processes aren't really well equipped for the pace and sort of agility required to make sort of policy innovation happen. And I guess we're also really interested in the relationship between the citizen and the state. So citizen engagement, citizen feedback or lack of it. I think that's, you know, information flow, society-wide collaboration, and local community governance, localization and decentralization or re-centralization. So again, we see both things happening at different times. Impacts on Indigenous communities, certainly here in Australia, that's been something that's been was very quick to be recognised. Inclusive communication, different languages, yep, including local Indigenous languages. Greater demand for solutions mapping. That sounds like a UNDP colleague, perhaps. I know you're quite you're all good solutions mappers in your accelerator labs. Further appreciation for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, absolutely, and recognizing that it needs to be done on a much speedier metabolism than it has been in the past. Design thinking and agile, Creative Commons, excellent. And inclusion of youth technopreneurs in decision making for public services delivery. I wonder whether the person who put that up might like to actually just talk to that one. It sounds like a very specific example that maybe we can all learn from. So I'm not sure I can see who put it in there, but if that's you and you'd like to sort of talk about that, what your experience, Bizam?
Sure, thanks.
Oh, we lost you. Come back.
Hang on. They should be coming back.
We'll get you back momentarily.
Where have they gone?
He's back. There we go. Hello, Bizam. You're probably you're probably turning your mute on and off, and Nicole's doing the same. Go for it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm audible right now.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a specific example, as you said, Brenton, in the case of Nepal. For instance, we have this digital Nepal framework, which is like a big project under the 15th five-year plan of the government of Nepal. And government now has really identified and recognized young entrepreneurs, basically in the technology and ICT domain, to have like bright minds, which can really help in COVID, and not just COVID limited to COVID, but also like resilient in terms of climate change as well, and also like climate change based agriculture as well. So we see a pattern where government is coming closer to the young entrepreneurs, especially in the ICT domain, and also working with them hands in hand, and also bringing their participation in the decision-making level. They have also included young people in the committee. You know, they've set like high-level committees for different discussions, and they have included young people, young ecosystem actors as well. So I think, yeah, I was referring to that. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Biz. It's quite nice to sort of hear sometimes a little bit more of the colour and the flavour of these activities. It's an interesting one, thinking about GovTech. Again, a lot of these situations there have been sort of movements that have been sort of pushing for a different relationship with government, or, you know, indeed for innovation practitioners, a different way of doing policy making. And suddenly, when the need is urgent enough or great enough, suddenly the sort of pushing on the door becomes a little bit easier. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of GovTech sort of movements sort of that were already there, but being accelerated, being welcomed in to a greater degree. Thank you for that. We might move up to the last quadrant. So I guess here we're just really interested in, you know, what things are we noticing about the way people are behaving in their life, and that could either be sort of individual choices that people are making, or the way in which workplaces are making different choices about the way that they operate, or indeed how communities are sort of managing this situation differently. So we're seeing a lot of, growing your own food. If I could see you all, I'd ask how many of you have made your own sourdough over the last 9 months. It's often quite a few people. Clearly working from home, remote working is a big one. Making decisions through virtual meetings and digital tools. So accepting that it's unfair to expect normal productivity, both from others and oneself, which is linked to this greater support to mental health in the workplace. I think recognizing that this situation puts stresses on us, and understanding that, and recognizing that, you know, bringing your whole person into the room. Less interest from business to work at concrete buildings, plazas, and prefer to meet at the gardens. So we're rediscovering our connection to nature and outside, even when we are working. But obviously, when we're not working, we're doing a lot more outside as well. I don't know about you. I've done a lot of walking out in nature over the last 6-9 months. Demanding greater public accountability. Yes, I mean, this is the flip side of you know, governments having to sort of make decisions faster, is that there's a sort of greater expectation that they will share their thinking and what they're trying with the public. Plant obsession, yes. Community support, mutual aid, solidarity, economy. Getting back to basics. People started to care more for each other. So this is an interesting thing, isn't it? About care and about like non-monetary values. You know, suddenly we realize that actually what's really important are not necessarily just the things we buy, but the relationships we have, and the support we can have for each other. Reap benefits in India works with student investing in youth. I don't know who put that one in, if they wanted to expand on that one. See if we get some different voices in here. More than be really good to hear from somebody who can talk a little bit more about that one. I'll let Nicole try and find you and get you onto the call. More community engagement, reflection. I like this one, that we are all taking life a bit too seriously. You've got, sorry, Nicole, I'm looking at you, nodding.
Yeah,
have you got
hi, I'm Sahana, I'm from India, Bangalore.
Hi, Sahana.
Hi, nice to be here, thanks. This is basically an organization that works with young students in activating their civic muscle. A lot of people spoke about how do you engage the youth. So how can the youth take decisions and be, work with the local municipal corporations to drive decisions that are society pro. So that's an initiative that they do.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes, that's brilliant. I mean, I think recognizing the untapped potential of our communities, whether that's our whole communities or young people, and just inviting them to be part of the solution is a great one, and particularly for policymakers who, if they're not careful, often always think that the answer is another program or service, but actually here it's about just mobilizing community wealth and resource. Okay, well, so we've done a quick tour of the board. I hope you found that interesting as I did. We've got about another sort of 5-10 minutes if anyone has any kind of just general thoughts or observations or something that they would like to add to this discussion. I know this is a little bit awkward to try and get you on the call because it's a webinar format, but if you'd like to put your hand up or mention something in the chat and I can call it out. Really interested to hear some other voices about this question. How can we learn from COVID for climate change? Could you please talk about how you relate these with 12 intervention points as the next step? Thank you, Tuva. So maybe should I bring that back up? Would that be helpful? So I guess the idea here is we haven't used Donella Meadows as an explicit reference point. Otherwise, we would have had 12 boxes to fill out rather than 4. But I guess I just wanted to sort of draw the point that we're actually sort of looking at changes and levers at different levels. So as I say, these are the 4 that we started with. So behaviours, social practices, policies, and governance. And I guess what we're going to try and do once we've sort of got all of the raw feedback is almost to sort of see if we can come up with a framework. Now, maybe we'll be guided by Donella Meadows, her own taxonomy, or maybe we'll come up with a slightly different one. I guess what we're really interested in sort of actionable insight. And presenting our findings back in a way that enables people to think about how they can take action. So our sort of, if you like, our primary audience, target audience that we're thinking about are sort of policymakers. They might be working in governments at different levels. They could also be working in NGOs and looking at things at a systems level, but generally people who are able to influence the sort of the policy environment in their jurisdictions. And what we want to do is to kind of play back the sorts of things that we've seen so that they can recognize that in their own work and then think about how they then leverage that for climate change. So I'm just having a look at the chat. Keith, central importance of information flow structures. Yeah. And systems thinking and links between health and environment. Yeah, is something that's come up as a result of COVID. Interesting also the relationship between health and the economy. Earlier in the crisis, people seem to assume that you had to make a choice between keeping people healthy or saving the economy by keeping everyone out and about, and actually realizing that indeed was a false choice, and actually those who kept things open actually did worse economically. So actually recognizing what are genuine trade-offs, or actually where things are more aligned than people may actually believe. I'm conscious I'm rambling. Would anyone like to join me?
And can I just point out another comment in the chat there
Please,
from Basma,
yeah.
who said it was interesting to see how we're rethinking human-centered design now to factor in other species as well. And that's definitely something I've noticed now. You know, Earth-centered design isn't such a radical idea anymore. I think maybe a year ago that was still a bit woo-woo, whereas now it's at least, you know, it's a bit more central. And, you know, maybe our focus on always designing for an individual or always designing for a human is starting to, you know, that's not quite serving us at the moment. And I think, yeah, I think that's really going to be quite important as we go into the next phases of our transitions.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Basma. Thank you, Nicole, for that. Apologies if you hear some yapping in a second. I have a 6-month-old puppy that's scratching at me, talking about bringing the whole person into our work.
Perhaps we can go to how other people can get involved, because there has been a lot of interest in the chat. There's the puppy. Yeah. And I think it just, you know, this type of, we've stretched people's thinking, so maybe it will be good to just let them take this away, because there's lots of things to do from this point.
Brilliant. Yes, absolutely. So look, I mentioned this before, but if you wanted to run your own workshop, we've kept the design of this workshop very simple for a reason, because we want it to be replicable. So if you would like to do this, all of the questions are available. We actually have, there is a survey which Nicole will probably share in the chat shortly. They are the questions that you just completed on the Miro board. So if you wanted to, you could essentially print those questions out, have a conversation with your teams. You don't need to use technology if you don't want to, and you could then sort of pop your answers into that survey as a way of sort of feeding it back into us. We would be really keen to kind of hear as many different variations of this as possible. So feel free to run your own workshop around those 4 questions, or just take time individually and complete the survey and send in some ideas, or share the survey with people who you think may also have some ideas on this. As I mentioned before, we know that there's an awful lot going on, both on tracking COVID initiatives, as well as obviously working on climate change. And so if you are working on either sides of those big topics, and you think that there's something that we ought to hear about, to feed into, if you know an example which you think is a really important example that ought to be shared, we'd love to sort of pull together some case studies of some particular issues, like some of the ones we spoke about on the way through in Nepal and in India. So if you've got some of those initiatives that deserve a wider audience, then feel free to tell us about it. And as I say, we will be, over the next, well, for the remainder of this year, we will be communicating constantly about the process that we're on in this project. We will be shortly looking for people who would like to sit in on co-design workshops to test out the framework that we come up with. And this might be an opportunity to bring some colleagues along, maybe who aren't on this call, so they can come at it with fresh eyes and see whether this is something that would be useful for them. As I say, we're not doing this because we just want to sort of collect data. We really want to support policymakers to, you know, recognize that these 9 months have actually taught us something. It's taught us that we can be more agile, we can be more experimental, we can ask the public to come with us on a journey, we can trust them with data, and we can help navigate uncertainty together. And so I think as we look forward over these coming years, these are ways of policy making that are going to be increasingly important. And so this project is designing to put a bit of a stake in the ground, just to stop, to reflect, and to play back what we have indeed learned. And so we don't aren't just busy, and then suddenly one day we wake up and realize that we've gone back to old ways of working. We really want to lean into these new ways of working and help make sure that they help us work on these big challenges. So I'm sorry, no, I've now rambled a little bit, but Jess, did you want to come in?
No, sorry, I was. Okay. We're having back chats on the
I see.
The chat there. But I think I actually would like to close with Jessica's comment that I'm going to post into the chat, because I think it's a really nice one. Yeah, I might just actually leave that there for people to read. I think we have been noticing a lot about, you know, the attention to mental health, and that really can't go away, I think. So thank you for sharing that, and I think it is a good place to end on.
Excellent, thank you. Well, look, thank you all for your contributions. Thank you for having a play with Miro, and we look forward to staying in touch with you, and enjoy the rest of this week.
Thanks, everybody.